Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Birdsong. It's me, your host, as always, Kayuda, and in this episode, we have Yourmatetom joining us. So, Yourmatetom is a world-traveling documentary filmmaker who takes a brutally honest and practical approach to grounded spirituality and psychedelics. With roughly 230,000 YouTube subscribers on his channel, Yourmatetom, and several million views on multiple videos, his down-to-earth approach has been well received by psychonauts and psychedelic enthusiasts within the YouTube community, also spanning the realms of spirituality, self-development, philosophy, psychology, and many other themes related to those themes. He's also the host of the Yourmatetom podcast, which you can find on all platforms that host good podcasts. So in this conversation, Tom and I touch on numerous things ranging from psychedelics, philosophy, consciousness, YouTube censorship, a bunch of other things. So I enjoyed this conversation. It was fun catching up with Tom, and I think that you'll find some gemstones in here as well. So that's enough for me. Let's get into our conversation. I trust that you will find value in this dialogue to carry with you on your own path forward.
I'm not very good with my geography, but
something like
somewhere that way. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, jeez. So what's going on, man? How you doing? How you actually doing?
Good, man. Yeah, good. Just I feel like these last couple months kind of getting over this quarantine, lockdown, just want to travel, go on an adventure. But I'm doing what I can with the tools that I have, so.
Yeah, well, look, let's just get into it, man. Let's paint a bit of a picture for the people who are going to be listening and the people who are going to be watching us. So you and I have been connected for, it's been a few years now. I don't know how many, but we first met at that cactus walk up at the Grampians where we took that small dose of San Pedro Peruvian torch. What was it? Cactus powder? Maybe like 3 or 4
something
years
like
ago.
That.
Yeah, I think you'd just come back from a trip from South America, maybe. I can't remember. Or maybe you were overseas
it was.
Was it?
I was going through like my existential crisis. That was like the dark point. And I didn't even know that we're going to have I thought it was a cactus walk, as in like we're just going through a nature walk that just so happened to have cactus around. So then, when the guide gave us the cactus juice, I'm like, what? I don't want to drink this. I wasn't prepared for this. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, maybe that was just after South America, and also you spent some time in Canada, didn't you, with psych substance? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I went to Mexico. Yeah, it was Peru, Mexico, Canada. So it was pretty profound trip.
Yeah. I remember that walk, and we just did the usual stuff that you kind of do when you're on a minimal dose of San Pedro, just having a good old time, talking consciousness and philosophy and psychedelics. And then later we teed up for that. Well, you invited me to share some combo for your live documentary on this crazy, powerful, strange Amazonian tree frog medicine. That was fun. It seems like so long ago now. And I think it was almost about 3 years ago.
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, it got received really well as well. So it was good.
Yeah, and then here we are. Oh yeah, and then of course we hung out in the teepee that we had set up at one of our last properties, and I think that was just after you were hanging out with Jared Wright from the Big Les Show, because you were telling me all these crazy stories about aliens and UFOs amongst other interesting things. But yeah, anyway, man, here we are.
Yeah. Have you ever seen UFOs?
Have I ever seen UFOs, unidentified flying? Well, I've seen plenty of flying objects that have gone unidentified, but I guess nothing in the sense of seeing an alien spacecraft. But hey, I'm totally open to it. And having moved out in the high country, we're a lot higher up in the mountains here, so maybe, man.
True. Maybe I've only seen it that one time with Jared, but ever since I haven't really been looking there. So,
So look, man. Where do we start? I don't know. Same place I start with all of my guests so far, I suppose. I keep wondering whether I should change up the format and make the podcast less formal in a sense with the introduction, or to just keep rolling with it. But I'm just going to keep rolling with it for now. And
more Joe Rogan-y.
Kind of. Yeah, look, a lot of my podcasts, they have kind of been somewhat formal in a sense, but we're all of us, we're always going through changes and shifting and ebbing and flowing with the tides and the rhythms of life. And I just feel like I'm starting to move into a stage where I want the podcast to be less formal. But I guess the first topic that I generally start on is inviting my guests, which is you, to start speaking on what they consider to be sacred, like remembering the sacred or honoring the sacred. So I guess the question here is, what's your relationship to the sacred, bro? And I know there are many ways to answer this, so just take it wherever you see fit.
Yeah. Oof. Well, some words that come to mind straight away is the earth is one, the physical dimension, even the human life, God, obviously, um, and just living in harmony, being honest, truth. These are things that I would hold sacred.
Yeah, you've done a number of videos, or I've at least seen, I think, two, where you're kind of talking about the philosophical concepts of dualism versus non-dualism. So I guess there's kind of, what are your thoughts when it comes to the sacred, like through a dualistic or non-dualistic lens?
I would consider myself a dualist. I think duality is the sacred process of how creation is even made in the first place. I know there's a lot of, because I don't really know, but some people would consider duality to be kind of an invention of the human mind, but I seem to go the opposite way. I think duality is what created the human mind, and there seems to be dual, kind of opposite or seemingly opposite poles of existence. Like, no, it's like, are you familiar with Hermeticism?
Yeah, sure.
The Hermetic laws? Yeah, like the law of polarity, for example, how it states that there is dual in everything. There's a relative, the absolute, hot, cold, up, down, good, evil. We can go forever about what themes as polarity, but I understand that the separation of the opposites, that's what's the illusion. But I still think that there's always going to be a harmony, a play with these two energies on all dimensions. You know, I don't think that duality just kind of disappears when you go up in the higher plane. There's always going to be polarity, except for source itself, but that kind of transcends dimensions. So that's a different topic.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you mentioned Hermeticism. So where are you at with your views on spirituality, and what are you exploring at the moment? And to lay a bit of context for where you might want to take it, it's that you kind of take this, how do you language it? You say like a very grounded approach, like what is it? A practical approach to spirituality. That's like one of your taglines, kind of, isn't it? Yeah. So
something like that.
I'd love for you to expand on this. Like, what does this actually look like in your life, and what kind of spiritual teachings and philosophies are you exploring?
I just try to reconcile like the physical and the spiritual, and I try to keep grounded as a human and try not to drift too far apart. It's because I've got stung before by going by taking the spiritual path, but from a kind of disassociative path. You know what I mean? Like going a little bit too up in the ether and using spirituality as an escape tool. And I got burnt really bad, and I got kind of hyper slapped by the psychedelic gods. And and maybe that's just my path too. I think a big part of my purpose is to really understand human nature and be a world bridger in that sense. So I can't speak for everyone, but for myself, I just like to stay grounded, and any philosophy or spiritual path that I try to walk, I at least try to, I don't know, get the abstract and concrete it into reality and try to make it so it's practical and understandable for people.
Yeah. Do you have any examples of that come to mind? Like, how do you take these philosophical spiritual teachings and ground it in on a practical level? Like, what's coming to mind there?
Well, it depends what kind of spiritual teachings kind of come to mind for you, just so I can
Well, I mean, if
think of it.
we were touching on Hermeticism, and I guess when you're looking at a lot of these spiritual teachings and philosophies, there is so much overlap. Like when you go into it, they're all pulling from the same place, aren't they? They're all pulling from source, and they're just kind of languaging them or articulating them in slightly different ways and putting them within the context of maybe the times or the cultures.
Well, it depends which area we're speaking about here, but like just now, I was kind of just researching about shadow work, for example. Like there's the abstract, and you can learn about the shadow and how that's the duality of man and the unconscious and all these repressed sides. But then when I try to bring it practically speaking, that's when I try to look for certain exercises. Like one example for shadow work exercises is to just look back on your life and see what are your favorite movies of all time and which character you identified with as a kid. And then you just kind of bring back, you kind of list like, okay, what do I like about this character? How does he relate to the world? And then that kind of fills in certain puzzle pieces. This is like one little tiny example, but just with these, there are certain abstract concepts that are very hard to put it into the concrete. And I still struggle with that, but I just at least try to, harmonize it with everyday reality.
Yeah, I saw you saying that you did an interview or a conversation with someone. I don't know his name, but he was big into Jungian psychology. And as soon as you say you're talking about shadow work and identifying with a particular character, the first word that comes to my mind is archetypes.
Exactly. Yeah, Jungian psychology can be very useful for sure, especially learning about the archetypes and collective unconscious and how that relates to everyone. And it really kind of puts a lens on humanity that we do all have like repressed dark sides of ourselves. We like to think that we're just good, all lovey-dovey people, but we've got some like dark shit in there. And it's not even just from our own lives, but our ancestors. It's like, it goes back, man. So it's good to acknowledge these parts of ourselves, because I kind of look at the shadow like a kid throwing a tantrum. You know what I mean? Like, it just wants to be acknowledged and loved and respected. And it's like, look at me, pay attention to me. The more you kind of repress it and be like, oh, shut up, what are you crying for? Then the more angry it gets. This is how villains are created. I'm sure there's probably many examples that pop up into mind of how, certain characters just get denied and acknowledged and ignored, and then they just get angrier and angrier to the point that they become a villain. So knowledge, man. Self-awareness.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's been so long since we spoke, and I remember the last time that we were talking, you were going through an intense shadow work process. I remember we were talking about your experience. I mean, this was ages ago now. This goes to show how long it's been since we've kind of caught up. This was with Iboga and how it really rattled your cage in a profoundly harrowing existential manner. And then, I remember you kind of like relinquished your relationship with consuming psychedelics, but then like after integrating all that, you've recently been to Peru and you've been getting back into it. So what's your approach to psychedelics now? And I mean, maybe we'll tie it into this theme that we're talking in, which is shadow work.
Yeah, I thought that I was never going to touch psychedelics ever again because it just scarred me. It kind of threw me into this dark abyss where the way that I would describe it was like my connection to God was severed. I just lost that. I went into like this nihilistic kind of mental space, but even further than nihilism, because nihilism is just, you believe that you're this meaningless speck of dust in a meaningless universe and there's no point to anything. But I went further into thinking that it's not just meaningless, there's a sinister purpose behind all this. And I was trapped in this infinite loop of this satanic matrix. Like, I went really deep into this stuff, and I'd really tried to, I went to try to shake it off, and it just that kind of despair and harrowing, wretched feelings that I was dealing with. And it took me a very, very long time and a lot of shadow work. And there was a lot that went into it. But after all that, I saw the light in the abyss, and it kind of went through the transformation, integrated the shadow. And haven't even experienced an episode of depression for years now, which is like a miracle. I thought that it kind of fractured my psyche and I was just going to be in this dark place forever. I guess that was also part of my relationship with psychedelics then. I think I was going from a place of taking. Like, I took psychedelics, like, how can I gain more knowledge? And I was just trying to gain and gain and gain and gain, to the point where, of course, the plants weren't happy with me. So now even my approach with psychedelics is a lot different. I don't necessarily try to gain anything, but obviously if I do, awesome, cool. But even now, like, my last mushroom ceremony, for example, my friend called me. He was like, oh, what'd you get out of it? I was like, actually, I didn't get anything. The point, like the lesson that I got was I need to give back more to the earth, like whether it's planting trees or just giving my services to people or whatever it is. But just my approach with psychedelics is that take it a lot more conservative. I don't try to force it unless it really calls me or if the opportunity presents itself. But yeah, my relationship with psychedelics have definitely, it's a lot different insofar that I just
Mm.
take it a lot more easy, for
Yeah.
sure. And
Well,
I'm not trying to actively get anything from it.
yeah, that's interesting that you bring that up because that's a journey that I've gone through as well. In the early days of doing all the, the quote unquote self development work, it's kind of like wanting to accumulate and amass of information and knowledge and thinking, how can
Hmm.
I constantly better myself? But then after a lot of that, it kind of gets to a point where, for almost like in the past, I've made a distinction between self-development work and spiritual, I don't know what you want to call it, expansion or connection or whatever it is, where like a lot
Hmm.
of the self-development work seems to be all about like wanting to advance and wanting to keep adding things on, whereas spirituality for me, it's kind of like stripping things back to the most simple fundamental levels. And it
Yeah.
was kind of like when I touched that space of not wanting to keep accumulating things, then working with plant medicines and psychedelics became more about, as you say, not wanting to gain anything, but really about giving back. It was more processes and practices of becoming more, well, finding more gratitude in life and finding out how I can be more of service to family and friends and community
Yeah.
and then the earth as a whole, and how I can live my life in more alignment and harmony. So yeah,
I
I think
feel
that's a
that.
big piece of the
Yeah, it's
puzzle.
like reconnecting, you know what
Yeah,
I mean?
totally.
It's even like, just to touch on that, like even this past year or so, I've kind of shifted from meditation to prayer, because meditation or using positive affirmation, again, it's adding, putting these affirmations of how can I better myself, or just, yeah, just getting. Whereas prayer is like you're humbling yourself to something higher than you and
Mm,
really giving thanks and gratitude. And
mm,
that's just changed the game for me. So
mm.
yeah, man.
Yeah, yeah, I certainly hold similar sentiments, and it's not to demean or not to say that there's no value in this other polarity that we're talking about. It's just
No,
kind
of
of,
course not.
yeah. So,
It depends on where you are, I guess, because most of my life I've been very kind of selfish and self-absorbed. So I've had to swing the pendulum to the other direction, you know. And maybe for other people, they're too giving, where to the point where they need to go a little bit more selfish. So it depends on where you are on the scale.
mhm. So, I mean, what was the catalyst then for you to go, okay, yeah, I'm ready to dip my toes back in?
How did it happen? I was actually hanging out with my first. It was actually in Uruguay. I had like a quarter tab of LSD, and it was just, yeah, I was just with my friend in Montevideo, and he's just, I guess it was just the situation at hand, and because it
Mm,
was such a tiny dose, and he's such a awesome character, always laughing and smiling, so I knew that nothing could really go wrong in that case. So yeah, that's where I kind of dipped my toes back in. But in terms of like the plant medicine world
mm,
with mushrooms, I had a experience with Big Les, Jared from the Big Les show, and we were just like climbing trees and connecting with nature and these kind of things. So yeah, that was actually my first mushroom trip in 3 years, because I did the last time I did it, I did the Terence McKenna Silent Darkness sort of thing, and that wasn't for me. I like
mm,
kind of connecting with more of the external world in terms of nature and like really exploring and stuff. So
mhm. And it was those experiences that kind of eased you back into heading back over to Peru to start drinking some more ayahuasca.
yeah, yeah, because all these experiences were like really, really tiny doses, just to kind of dip my toes back in the water, because there was obviously a lot of trauma there. So I had to mend my relationship with these plants. And the
Yeah.
Peru thing, it was a opportunity that came around where a retreat invited us to go over there. So, you know, like to film some stuff, and also to remend my relationship with ayahuasca, because ayahuasca is a lot, I feel like it's a lot more intense than just having like a small dose of mushrooms, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
uh yeah, so, and that experience was, it was actually really good. Like I did have one experience which was like where I tapped into that dark abyss, like sort of that malevolent spirit dimension, whatever you want to call it, where I was getting overwhelmed.
Mm,
And but I guess the tools that I had in my belt at that stage, I
mm,
actually went through the other side, because the last time that happened, I completely freaked out. And of course, the more you freak out and resist, the more intense the trip's going to be, and the more like the devils are going to come and rip your reality apart. Whereas if you have peace in your heart, these devils turn into angels and they allow you kind of let go. And that's what happened to me. Yeah.
Actually, there's a few questions here that I want to get your views, perspectives, philosophies on. Like you touched on the spirit world. I for sure want to touch on that with you. But, to take it back a step, like you mentioned LSD and then you mentioned small doses of mushrooms and then ayahuasca. How are you kind of approaching and preparing for the use of these substances these days? Like, do you have a different perspective when it comes to sacramental use versus recreational use? Like, how do you kind of see this?
These last couple of years, for me personally, I exclusively take them in ceremonial contexts. I just don't find like even taking mushrooms for fun doesn't sound appealing to me at all, because it's not fun taking it that way. Sometimes I wish I could just, take a bunch of mushrooms and do whatever. But just because I've gone through like so deep experiences, I can't take these lightly, So I tend to just take them in a ceremonial context. Like the last one that I had was we had a fire ceremony, and we're just like sitting up, staring at the fire. It was like an all-nighter thing. And that changed my perspective on things, because usually with ayahuasca, for example, I'll just tend to lie down, close my eyes, and just let it take me wherever it needs to take me. Whereas this one was more of a Native American sort of tradition, like a peyote sort of ceremony. I haven't done peyote, but just from what I've heard, it's sort of similar to that. And you're sitting up, you're not even allowed to close your eyes, and you just have to stare at the fire, which kind of, it acts as an anchor, so it's always there, so you don't float up into space too much. Not saying that that's a good or a bad thing, but for me, again, that's the sort of grounded spiritual practice that I really like, just kind of staying centered and focused.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I love about working with a fire in general, but especially so in ceremonial or sacramental use, because that fire is really like you said, it's an anchor. It's the central pillar to always come back to. It's like that central altar.
100%, man.
Yeah.
So fire is sacred, to go back to your sacred question as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Well, do you have like a routine, or a routine's kind of a funny word, and a checklist is coming to mind, but that's kind of a strange word too. Like it's kind of like structured and rigid, but I guess like what I'm getting at is like when you're, things to go over before stepping into this. Kind of ties into preparation, things to get, like you're kind of preparing yourself in a certain way with tools and skills to navigate like the experience, to help you like surrender or just explore these states of consciousness.
I feel what you're saying. Yeah, I kind of take it's sort of similar to the ayahuasca sort of preparation. I just tend to be a little bit more strict on my diet, avoid certain foods, especially like processed foods and sugars and certain meats, and I just try to kind of cleanse my body at least a few days beforehand, and avoid watching any like dark movies or shows, just so it doesn't like kind of set in those images in my mind before I go into a trip. And I'll just tend to reflect a little bit more, journal, and set my intentions as well, prime my brain. Yeah, these kind of things. What about you? What do you do?
Well, yeah, I think that's an important point that you bring up, and that's something that I find there to be significance in as well, which is being mindful of what we're taking in. So, if you want to just use the word information or energy, what are we taking in when it comes to nutrition, dietary, the information that we're exposed to online? Like I've certainly learned that the hard way in the past, where, I'm sure that I have been scrolling the news feed in the past, and something kind of triggers something in my consciousness, and it's like it's got kind of like sinister or malevolent vibes, or you might read something about a rape or a murder, or that comes up in the feed or somewhere, and it's like, shit, now that's like kind of in my consciousness. Or maybe I'll check my phone beforehand and I'll get a text message of something that I've got to deal with, and it's like, now that's in my consciousness. But so being mindful about the information that we're exposing ourselves to beforehand. But look, there's not all that much that I really do these days. I mean, I try to live my life in a very similar way, whether I'm working, well, I do live my life in a very similar way, whether I'm working with psychedelics or sacred medicines or not. It's just like an
Yeah.
adjunct part of my life. So it's kind of just business as usual. Like if I'm going into something like ayahuasca, then I will clean up my diet to some degree. But
Yeah.
when I was working with other plant medicines, no, setting intentions is a big part of it, and making sure that I'm solid with a breathwork practice, and having a clean, tidy space, making sure I've got things there that I want to have in ceremony, such as musical instruments or having the fire to connect with or having access to nature. But I mean, this is all just regular life stuff for me. So it's
Life
kind
is a
of,
ceremony, right?
yeah, well, in one sense, yeah, totally. So I used to have like a big checklist of things that I would kind of make sure I was adhering to get the most out of the experience back in the day. But then I think as I have changed as a person and I've kind of realigned or recalibrated my life to get more in tune with nature, everything becomes so much more simplistic.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that. Yeah, it doesn't have to be like this huge complex list that you have to do beforehand. But like I said, just clean up my diet, be aware of what information is going into my consciousness. Yeah, pretty simple stuff. And I'll like exercise and stretch at least, keep fit for the few days before I go into ceremony. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe it's a symptom of the Western mind, like the civilized mind, to overcomplicate things and again adding things on. It's like, what can I be doing to prepare? But if we're looking to the traditional indigenous ways of working with these medicines, they certainly don't have this long laundry list of things that they need to do to prepare or integrate.
Exactly. I think it's even more just avoiding certain things rather than doing certain things, especially like I'm not going to watch a horror movie the night before I go into ceremony.
Totally. Yeah.
I think that would go over very well. Well, I don't know. Unless someone has a different story.
Well, it's an interesting conversation to have, because then at the same time, it's like, yeah, you don't want to have that kind of stuff coming into your conscious mind, because it's going to perhaps trigger these subconscious things, which are going to result in maybe a terrifying or a harrowing experience, or more so than it perhaps needs to be. But at the same time, it's kind of having that awareness that these are all aspects of life, of the human experience, the life experience. And you don't want to perhaps you don't want to be in a place of resisting them if they do come up. You do want to be able to face them head on and to be able to process them and assimilate them, to move through them, as opposed to just being in that space of, I do not want this in my consciousness. It's like, if it comes in, it can come in and it can flow through.
Like being too overly sensitive in that sense. Because even when I'd gone through this existential crisis a few years ago now, I was so oversensitive to life that I could not listen to heavy metal without it ruining my day, or watch a scary movie which would like completely mess up my mind. And that's no place to be, because life, it's like the saying goes, it's better to be a warrior in the garden than a gardener in the war. It's good to, you hope to God that you never put yourself in a situation with conflict, but at the same time, you want to be prepared for it if worst case scenario and it does happen. Even like part of, talking about spiritual practice, how do I ground things? Even after Peru earlier this year, I had some pretty, as you go after ayahuasca retreat, you're pretty floaty, you're in this place of just processing everything that happened. And usually people will just go home, meditate, do their thing, just so they can process. Straight after the retreat, man, I went to Chile, and they're going through like this anarchic revolution of like people versus the police. And I was like, so this was like a very interesting way of processing all my experiences, because I went through like the sacred valley in the mountains, and it was peace and beauty, and then to like literal hell. There was like this collective rage, and that for me was like a sign that I was actually grounding these experiences, because it didn't affect me in a negative way, where it just kind of, I don't know, it didn't throw me into this downward spiral of despair or loss of hope or anything like that. I was able to navigate through this war-torn city but with grace, you know what I mean? And that took
Totally.
me, I wouldn't
Yeah.
recommend that for everybody, of course, but
Mhm.
it definitely, it was an interesting way of integrating, that's for sure. And and this year as well, that's why, even speaking of horror movies, like I watched Jacob's Ladder, which is a really good movie. And I'm just trying to now just be more at peace with the darkness, even if it's little things like this, and not being too overly sensitive with things, but not disconnected either, you know? So it's like a fine line.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it certainly sounds like an experiential comprehension of those polarities that we're talking about. Yeah, coming to see the extreme sides of the darkness and the extreme sides of the lightness, and perhaps that's a spiritual philosophy, and it's certainly a spiritual philosophy that I can appreciate. That to come to be able to step into greater amounts of what do we want to call it, the light or our higher self, the more virtuous, compassionate self. And there's probably loads of ways that you could articulate it. Then there's a necessity, an importance, a significance in being able to stoop to the darkest of dark, the lowest of lows, and really experience that on a visceral level, tangible level, so that we know, so we can keep stretching and expanding our like multi-dimensional sense of self.
Yeah, man. And sometimes people in those spaces need help. And how is someone on the spiritual path going to help them unless they actually go into hell themselves? So you can like kind of reach them out. I was even talking to a friend, and he was speaking to a teacher who's like into Tibetan Buddhism and stuff like that. And there are certain monks that actually meditate and go through like these really deep layers of hell, so they can pull out souls who are stuck there. And that to me is like, man, that's like an angel. Imagine you being stuck in hell, and then someone comes, reaches their hand, and pulls you out of there. I'd be super grateful. So it's that's definitely a place for that. Yeah, depends on where you are, I guess. I don't know if I'd do that, but I'm pretty sure even Jesus did that. You know, he went to hell, and like the demons couldn't even touch him because he's so grounded in his true self. And I find that really inspiring for people who are able to do that. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm trying to.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Look, I wouldn't say it's a common or a regular practice of mine, and I rarely sit down for like a formal meditation session these days. Like there was like a couple of years ago where I kept track of my meditation, and I meditated every single day for 365 days straight, and then maybe missed a couple of days, 3 or 4 or 5 days within the next year. So it was almost 2 years of solid meditation. But then afterwards, I just stopped. I was like, okay, yeah, I know the value of meditating, but for myself, being outside in nature and doing things like kind of what you might consider to be monotonous tasks of pulling weeds out in the garden, or planting in the seeds or the seedlings for the springtime or the summer crops or whatever it is. Like that's, people say like there's a meditative quality within that, and then you start getting into the arguments of like, that's not real meditation or whatever it is. But the preamble, yeah. Well, look, that's all just a preamble to say that sometimes when I would sit down in meditation, I would try and conjure up the most ghastly, ghouly, like whatever, like the most terrifying images that I could come up with in my mind, just to, I'd have like monsters and creatures with flesh hanging off them, and I'd imagine them coming into my mind and tearing shreds off me, and just putting myself into like all of these seemingly bizarre, twisted scenarios, like my parents dying or loved ones dying in horrible accidents or whatever, just really gruesome images, just to, it's almost like not really a sadistic thing, but just to see how I would respond to these things. Because it's like, okay, if I can put myself mentally and emotionally, spiritually into these kind of situations, then I'm kind of strengthening one type of spiritual or mental, psycho-emotional muscle, in a sense. It's kind of like when we go through the darkness and we experience all of these horrid things, harrowing experiences in ayahuasca, or pick your psychedelic substance of choice.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, look, what did I say? Oh, spirit world. That's what I would love to hear your take on, man. You know, you've
Okay.
done heaps of, you've had your explorations on the embodied level, but also on like the conceptual level, putting together all of these videos when it comes to consciousness, psychology, psychedelics, philosophy, the non-dual philosophy, and on and on and on. So, like, what's your experience, take, perspective on like traditional indigenous cosmologies that incorporate what we consider to be the shamanic spirit world and coming into contact with entities and intelligences that are seemingly like distinct from one sense of self,
Yeah.
compared to
Yeah.
say the more materialist reductionist perspective that it's like it's a byproduct, it's a state of mind that's a byproduct of the brain. Or, you know, we were touching on the Jungian train of thought as well, where we're talking about subconscious mind, collective unconscious, the archetypal energies. So like, what's your perspective at the intersection of all of these things?
Oh man, I think it's a real place. uh, I mean, yeah, you could take the Jungian perspective and say it's a projection of the collective unconscious, but that to me just sounds like a psychological spin on spirit world, really. I definitely think it's a real place. I think everything has a spirit in terms, even just on the nature level, every trees, plants, animals. But then you go on the higher dimensions, and that's when you go into. It's just so hard, man, to like really concrete these abstractions because it's hard to measure these things, you know, especially in our using our linear rational minds. But based on my experiences traveling to these dimensions, it just seems so overwhelmingly real. And I feel like humanity has always believed in the spirit world. And not just saying this just because humanity believed it for the longest time, it means it's true. But that being said, who knows, man? Maybe even in 100 years' time from now, will be scientifically proven. I think they're already doing research. I forgot which university, but they're trying to map out like these DMT spirit realms because
Like with the
for a lot,
intravenous DMT?
yeah, oh, I don't know if it's intravenous DMT, but they're definitely trying to map out these realms and archetypes because a lot of these experiences are universal. You know, it seems anyway from an experiential point of view that these are actual places that you're going to. And even in certain cases, you can even have these telepathic experiences where you and your friend are like literally seeing the same thing. So how does that just how is that just a random hallucination, you know? I don't know, man. I don't know. What do
Yeah,
you think?
telepathy. When we start talking about telepathy and shared experiences, that's when things start, like, you're starting to open up a bit more of a Pandora's box there in the way
Yeah.
that consciousness works. Well, I mean, for a long time I've kind of have said, and it's a super reductionist way of thinking, but just as a generalization, I've said it really depends on how you view consciousness, whether you think that consciousness is the byproduct of the brain, or you think that consciousness is like the brain is the, yeah, what's the classical way of articulating it? It's like the receiver of the radio wavelengths.
Right,
It's
right,
like your
right.
brain is like the
Consciousness is the fundamental reality that underlies all of existence, and
yeah, I
everything
don't
else is a manifestation of that.
know.
Yeah, well, it's sort of like how I said, like about the duality thing. I don't think that the brain creates duality. I think duality creates the brain, and that's sort of like a similar thing of consciousness. I don't believe that the brain creates consciousness. I think that the brain is a byproduct of consciousness. I know this sounds probably very pseudoscientific and hippie woo-woo, and I don't really have any proof of this, but I'm sure there are a lot of scientists that are working very hard to prove this stuff. We're just not there yet.
Yeah, look, when it comes down to it, I consider myself to be. Oh, look. I was going to say I consider myself to be a bit of a dummy when it comes to all this stuff. Like, that's probably a bit of a
Me too,
self
me
put down.
too.
I don't actually really think that like I'm a dummy, but I'm certainly no expert when it comes to this, and I'm certainly not anywhere near that. I don't have a high level of being able to articulate or language a lot of these concepts, but you know, some of the guys that I respect and I've been listening to a lot of lately is Paul Chek. I think Paul Chek, he's pretty tuned in when it comes to concepts of spirituality and God, and talking about some of these concepts that we're talking about.
Yep.
Yeah, and also this podcast called AlphaCast, the
Okay.
AlfaVedic podcast. So there's two guys who host that podcast, Dr. Berolando and Mike Winner, who are founders of this company, AlfaVedic, and they're all about holistic health, largely through the lens of some of the concepts, such as found in Russellian science. So Walter Russell was a guy who explored the science behind the notion of like living in an electric cosmos and how consciousness, the fabric of consciousness, is intertwined with this electric force of creation. And they see health through the lens of German new medicine, which is really interesting, and what I see to be the forefront, the frontier of understanding and appreciating what it is that constitutes health and disease.
Mm.
And they are into permaculture and regenerative biodynamic gardening principles, and they make all of their own products and all of that. But yeah, look, anyway, when it comes to notions like the electric nature of the universe, like of consciousness, and what the implications of those realities are, and you start to go down the rabbit hole. I mean, I'm going to stop myself right here because I am a complete rookie at trying to articulate these concepts. But look, yeah, if there's an spark of interest there, I certainly suggest that you go and check out either Paul Chek or the AlfaVedic podcast. I think Paul Chek's podcast is Living 4D with Paul Chek, or AlphaCast. But yeah, look, I just happen to find it all really interesting.
And what was it say? Like, does this state that consciousness is the fundamental reality?
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like kind of like the field of consciousness is electric. It's like we live in an electric universe, an electric cosmos, and this ties back into pretty much all spiritual philosophies, or all philosophies on consciousness outside of kind of the orthodox Western model of consciousness and science. It goes back thousands and thousands of years. It's that consciousness precedes matter.
Yes.
Thought first, form second.
Yeah, I believe that.
Yeah,
that kind of ties in with the whole even Hermetic philosophy as well, of polarity and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, 100%. Well, I can't say 100%, but I'm pretty sure. I would bet on it.
Yeah. Look, that's my view. Yeah. Well, look, one of the other things that I wanted to talk to you about was YouTube censorship.
Okay.
Most people know you through your YouTube channel and all the content that you've been creating over the years, but it's obvious, unless you've been living under a rock, that we're entering an age where censorship is ramping up in full force. So I'd love to have you tell us a little bit about what's going on with your channel.
Yeah. Well, my channel's been, like, a lot of the videos have been kind of demonetized. That's nothing new, and I've kind of accepted that. Like, there are certain videos where I can be like, all right, fair enough, I'm talking about these substances, maybe YouTube doesn't want to promote it to everybody. But lately, man, earlier this year I got a strike for linking a herbal blend company like Damiana and things like that, and the appeal got rejected. So this was a human being looking at this and being like, nah, sorry. And so I got a permanent warning on my channel. Usually warnings and strikes only last for about 90 days, and after that they disappear. But for whatever reason, my channel got special treatment, and I've got a permanent warning. So if I get another strike, you can't post for a week, can't post any comments. I mean, you can comment on other videos, but you can't post, you can't put it, post in the community tab, or upload a video or a story or anything like that. And
so hold that thought. So like when you're talking a herbal company, where we're talking, there's no prohibited substances at all. We're talking about like natural herbs here that
like
you would find down at
mugwort and Damiana,
mullein, calendula,
blue lily,
that sort of
all
thing.
that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Rose, exactly. So it's less psychoactive than coffee. I'll say that.
Sure.
And yeah, man. So then I got, like, recently, almost what is it? It's been over 2 weeks now, man. Yeah, I'm still waiting for the appeal on that one, but I got a strike for linking a testing kit, which is like absolutely ridiculous, because it's like they basically claimed that it was an illegal or regulated goods and services, but it's literally a product just to test your substance, like which can literally save some lives in some cases. And a lot of channels do this. Even Psych Substance, he's been using the exact same link, same company on all his videos for many years. He's never received a strike for this, but for some reason I did. I have appealed it, and it's just taken them ages to accept or deny. I hope, like I know that I'm in the right, so I would assume that that the appeal does get accepted. But yeah, who knows? It definitely seems that YouTube is ramping up on its censorship, and I don't even have the worst of it, man. I reckon it would be even much worse for channels who are like on the political right. I feel like they're getting a lot more targeted, or quote unquote truth channels, let's say, about conspiracy theories. I feel like social media is definitely doubling down on censoring these sort of topics.
Yeah, surely you've had some time to muse on why that might be, in particular, why you might be targeted. What have you come up with? Is it anything that you can share here?
I don't know. There's some theory. I don't know. There's a lot of theories, because there are some channels who just talk about psychedelics and drugs, but more from a scientific pharmacological point of view, whereas I kind of talk about more the spiritual side and critical thinking. Like, that's a theory. It might not be. It could just be a bot, someone that just, I don't know, first day on the job who thinks that I'm selling drugs or something. I don't know. I hope that it really is just a mistake and it's not nothing sinister behind it, but
sure.
Who knows? Who knows?
So it could just be, yeah, because I mean, you've been in the game doing this thing for a long time now. Like, when it comes to channels that are doing content on spirituality, the intersection between spirituality and psychedelics and sacred medicines, it's like, who is there? Well, you're definitely one of the most well-recognized like YouTubers, along with Psyched Substance, and I know there's a handful of others. Do you want to give anyone a shout out who you consider to be worthy of
in
this
that realm
type of content?
Oh, well, there's CG Kid. Is not necessarily about spirituality, but he helps people overcome drug addiction, and he goes into his past experiences. But there's not a whole lot, is there?
Well, I mean, there's not a whole lot that have been doing it as consistently as yourself, and that do it with from the level of like professional filmmaking type of quality. There's a lot of people who post up their trip reports and, you know, have a few videos here and there talking about ayahuasca or mushrooms or whatever it is. But yeah, I mean, I guess I would be curious to know if they have been getting targeted with any kind of censorship issues, or if it's just yourself.
Yeah. Oh, I've had a few comments say that there are some channels, but from other countries. So I wouldn't know, like a Polish channel, someone other countries in Europe. So yeah, none that I would personally know.
Yeah. Yeah, well, look, I guess I'm of the perspective that, from one perspective anyway, that, you know, it's a bit of a witch hunt. The witch hunt is still continuing on from hundreds of years ago. You know, it's just kind of materialized and manifested in a different form, because we still see a lot of people in the flesh who are practicing natural alternative medicines who are getting shut down to the, you know, or even penalized or criminalized when it comes to practicing all these natural alternative therapies. So, but I mean, whether it's actually the witch hunt in your case or not, I couldn't say. But I mean, from an overarching perspective, when you look at the state of consciousness on the planet right now, yeah.
And it also depends on who's reviewing these videos and what religious background they have. Maybe someone could just have a personal vendetta. Who knows? Like, I know that a lot of, for example, Christian channels have been targeted by YouTube. So it seems that's something interesting to note.
Right.
So it seems that, like, for example, you can shit on Christianity all you want, but then as soon as you shit on Islam, then it's hate speech, and then you get punished by YouTube. So I just kind of find there's a bit of a imbalance when it comes to YouTube censorship. It's not consistent. It seems to be like one side of the political spectrum that's attacking a certain idea.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not a free speech platform. It's a private corporation that has its own agendas. So
exactly. But if they want to do what they want, they shouldn't paint themselves to be a platform, because a platform should be neutral. You know? So who knows?
Yeah.
YouTube used to be the wild west of YouTube is definitely over. I think that was about 2006 to 2016. That's when you could really post whatever you want, and
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
beautiful, man. And I think that's when YouTube really they promoted quality content over. Now it's more about who uploads frequently and long.
Right.
It's all about watch time. Whereas back then they used to have like a 5-star system. I kind of like those days.
Mm.
But we are where we are, so you got to adapt, right? So
Mm-hmm. Oh, man, it's such an interesting thing when you are creating a life that is intertwined with the digital world, and then you're getting censored and penalized for providing, whether it's valuable information or education or entertainment for others. So I mean, how are you dealing with this? Like, what's your relationship with, well, what's your relationship with, like, or what's another way to language this, what have you been musing on when it comes to creating a livelihood intertwined with internet media, and then now having more content censored?
well, usually like after this strike, I was very frustrated, and you get like this sense of panic, like, oh shit, man, my whole channel is going to be at risk, to the point where I even went through all my videos just to remove the testing link. Even though I know I'm in the right, it's just because it's just not worth the trouble, I want to pick my battles. But yeah, I don't know, man. I just try to usually after a few days of getting censored or getting a strike, I usually calm down and just to hope for the best and do what I do. And maybe even try, like, even now I'm shifting more towards spirituality, self-development, psychology, philosophy, and a little bit less on psychedelics. Or at least if I do make videos on psychedelics, it'd be just me talking about it. I try to be less kind of provocative with like the live experiences. I don't really do that stuff anymore anyway, but yeah, I just try to be a little bit more careful and play the game and focus on the integration part of psychedelics, which for me is something that's very important to me anyway. As you know, the
Yeah.
ceremony is like a very small percentage of the bigger picture. It's all about how you integrate those experiences and apply it to your daily life. So
Yeah, totally. I mean, have you thought about this notion of decentralization? And I mean, maybe this falls into like grounded spirituality too, like from a spiritual point of view, like we could perhaps see the I don't even know if it's spiritual. It's such a weird, strange kind of word to use.
It
But it's
is.
like,
It is. Yeah.
when we're thinking about all the centralized platforms and the control and the agenda and the power games that are at play, if we're looking at something like YouTube, which has such power over internet media, like how do you
Oh yeah.
move forward and expand outwards from there so all your eggs aren't in one basket, the YouTube basket?
Yeah, it's difficult, man, because YouTube has the monopoly on these video websites. So there's nothing even that comes close to it. I mean, there are certain websites like BitChute seems to be one that people would recommend, which is decentralized, but it's just a horrible website in terms of just the servers uploading. Like I usually when I upload a video, I got to upload it like 5 times just for it to finally publish. So it's like, and then for it to get like tiny amount of views. So no one's really using it. Like people will say like, yeah, go on BitChute. But it's like, yeah, but you're on YouTube saying this. So clearly you're still using YouTube. So I don't know, man. I'm going to just try to continue playing the game. Hopefully I don't get stung too hard. But, when another video sharing platform rises up to the challenge, I'll go for it. But at this stage, there's nothing, man, that even comes close to YouTube. They have the monopoly. It seems that that's just the way it is for now. And who knows? Maybe like this is just the optimistic side of myself saying this, but maybe YouTube will eventually get their shit together and realize that if they keep censoring people, that people will leave the platform. So at the end of the day, they are a business first, so they're not going to. But I don't know. This could just be the naivety within me. I'm not sure. It's very uncertain at this stage.
Yeah. Well, look, when it comes to your filmmaking and like navigating computer time and editing time, like, I mean, you're investing so much time and energy into these creations that you know, it's got to be a big blow when you do receive something like a strike, or you're getting demonetized or whatever else. So, I mean, that's it's kind of obvious. I can see you nodding your head there, but I mean, there's a question here that's like something to do with reconciling. Like, I mean, how do you reconcile this sacrifice? I don't even know if you see it as a sacrifice, but I guess I'm projecting here, like the sacrifice of spending a lot of time
Yeah.
in front of the computer doing all the editing and the filming and everything rather than elsewhere. Let's say, like actually spending time in nature. Is that something you muse on?
Well, I would say that I reconcile it in the way that I'm still these are tangible skills that I'm building. So let's say
Mm,
even if worst case scenario my YouTube channel gets shut down, I've got a whole bunch of skills
mm,
that I can make like awesome films, and I could do many things. I could freelance worst case scenario for other people, or uh, I don't know, pitch to Netflix or go to another video sharing platform and
mm,
just continue doing my thing. I'll always find a way. So
mm,
I'm still very grateful for even just having the skills that I have, and I'm very grateful for YouTube for even giving me the opportunity to do what I do.
mm,
And so yeah, it'll all work out,
mm.
even if shit hits the fan.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I think I'm asking it from the point of view where I do like creating, but I also, my window of being on technology and, you know, doing editing and fixing up the audio for the podcasts and then posting on social media, that the window for that, it's very, very small compared to the time that I like spending out in nature or
Yeah.
playing music or spending time with the family or something. So it's almost like I'm trying to artificially warp my values a little bit to see the value within spending more time, like kind of doing these digital creations and putting them online. But yeah, it's something that I'm still, something I've been navigating for years, man. It's like we're talking about
Yeah.
like centralized platforms, and like when we're talking about social media, there's YouTube, and there's Facebook, there's Instagram, and it's like I I have to like reconcile with myself about all the censorship and the agendas at play. And it's like, do I want to be part of like these centralized platforms? And like, you know, that's where your audience is. And you know, like they've got such a large monopoly, but at the same time, it's kind of like it impedes kind of on my moral compass a little bit. It's like I don't want to be supporting companies or corporations that have those kind of political agendas. So yeah, it's a thing that I'm constantly navigating, man.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. And it depends on how much you actually like creating and editing and all that kind of stuff. Because obviously if it doesn't resonate with you, but you're doing it just because you feel like you have to, then that's a different question. I really like creating. I think I don't know, like making videos really exercises a lot of my creative muscles. Like, I have to write, film, edit, learn about a subject. So I don't know, it kind of helps me. Yeah, it does kind of help me on my self development journey in a lot of ways, and just
Mm-hmm.
connecting with a bunch of people, and doing my podcast as well, and
Mm,
learning from experts from all different fields. So
mm,
it's a good
mm.
opportunity. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see where it goes. Like, I'm still happy doing what I'm doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Things can change. They might not. I don't know, man. We'll see. See
Well,
how
what
it
have been
goes.
some of the most memorable times that you've had through all of the collabs that you've done and all the interesting people that you've connected with?
There's been a few, man. Like the one with Psych Substance in Canada, that was interesting. Obviously, it
Mm.
was also the time that triggered the darkest period of my life as well. But it's a good story, regardless.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it was painful. Even
Mm.
collaborating with Jared from Big Les Show, which I would consider to be a very close friend now, and yeah, he's just an awesome dude, and just like
Mm.
lots of people, man. Like, even actually soon I'm going to be interviewing, I forget his last name, so I feel so rude, but Brian something or other. He's the author of the Immortality Key. He just went on the Joe Rogan Experience, and he's like
Yep.
this scholar who researched early Christianity and how they may have used the psychedelic compound in their wine, which seems very, very interesting, and kind of, I don't know. I really want to ask him what he thinks about that and how that clashes with fundamental Christianity. Even if it does, I don't know. There's been a lot of misconceptions with that. And but it's so easy to kind of get misconceptions when you're talking about a 2,000-year-old religion. Of course, things are going to change over time. But yeah, in terms of the things that come up to mind, just like those two, like Jared, Big Les Show, and just traveling the world. Dakota, of course, gone to Dakota of Earth and just hanging out with him. Had an awesome India journey, which was really cool, and traveling through Peru. And I was going to go to Mexico with him this year, but obviously with a pandemic, that didn't happen. When do you think we're even going to be allowed to travel internationally? A long while, huh?
Ask the dictator of Victoria, mate.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I don't know. It
Jeez.
really depends on their like larger political agendas and what's going on behind the scenes. Like, what's the real reason for all of this stuff, and how does it fit into their bigger picture?
Mm.
I don't know. Yeah, well, I mean, you're talking about Dakota. He's an interesting guy, man. I don't know him personally, but I've been tuning into a lot of his Instagram posts and some of his YouTube videos over the years. And there's a few guys like that I've seen you hang out with that are just down to earth cats. They're just grounded. They're like, oh yeah, he's just like a cool guy, a regular guy that's into really cool shit and has done well, like yourself, kind of documenting the journey of life and all the things that you're interested in.
Yeah, and you know, and he's been through like some pretty crazy places, like this satanic temple in Mexico and things like that. So I like hanging out with people like that who's just able to, who's just up for an epic quest, no matter where it is, you know. And you learn a lot, especially from even people like, you know, I don't resonate obviously with the satanic perspective, but I'm very interested to learn why they think the way they do. And I think it's important to talk to people from all sorts of different belief systems instead of just kind of relaying your own echo chamber, which is what social media has propagated, it seems.
Yes, there's certainly an importance in exposing ourselves to a myriad of perspectives to gain a well-rounded view of the world, of life, of human psychology, for sure. Yeah. Well, hey, I've got a couple of Instagram questions here for you that I'm going to ask. Okay, so what are you most curious about right now, man?
Right now, yeah, I've been going down the Christianity rabbit hole. Just wanted to learn about that because I've never read the Bible my whole life, so I've been reading that and just even from a storytelling perspective and learning about the Western canon, I guess you could say, because it's like the foundation of all Western society. So I thought, you know what, I should probably read this, the Judeo-Christian story, and yeah, just want to learn more about it. So that's kind of what I'm into right now.
Anything that sparks to the front of your consciousness when it comes to talking about the Bible? Like, what's something interesting you've learned out of there so far?
Well, something that I've learned actually, because a lot of people would say that it's been twisted and distorted over time, but from what I understand, even the Bible that we're reading right now is still translated from the original transcripts. So it actually hasn't been distorted at all, which kind of blew my mind because I just thought like, oh yeah, it's been lost over time and translated a billion times. But just because it's been translated, it doesn't mean that the essence of it has lost. You know, it's like me saying, hello, how are you? And then me saying it in Spanish, hola, ¿cómo estás? Like, yeah, there might be some different semantics that might mean certain things, but the essence is still exactly the same. So that's something that kind of blew my mind.
That's it. Where did you hear this? Or
From
read
all
about it?
sorts of, from all sorts of people who are deep into like from Catholicism, Eastern Orthodox, Protestants, scholars. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was under the assumption or presumption that, like you said, the Bible had been twisted and distorted as it kind of moved down through the times. But that's really interesting, or at least like what you said, perhaps specific words have,
Yeah.
and maybe. But I mean, words hold weight and meaning, and sometimes like the entire meaning of a message could be distorted based on just a word change or a
Yeah.
misinterpretation of
But you
one
can
particular
also
word.
read the original manuscripts, you know, like if you care that much about the original sayings, you can do that. So I think that's quite interesting. And yeah, man, it's even just like reading through the Bible now, I can see how many movies that we watch today has been influenced by this stuff. So
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah,
yeah.
okay. All right. Here's another rapid fire Instagram question for you. When it comes to ceremonial practices and rituals, how do these fit into Tom's life?
The ceremonials, you're talking about like
Ceremonial practices, well, ceremonial practices and rituals, I guess, from a generalized point of view. I guess we kind of covered like the importance of ceremony within sacramental use, but I guess how does ceremony and ritual slot into daily life for you? Is it a thing or is it relegated to the psychedelic experience?
yeah, well, in terms of applying these ceremonial practices, like every morning I'll always pray slash meditate and just really give thanks to source and really uh yeah, tap into gratitude. Gratitude is like a big thing for me. Always like giving thanks and uh journaling before I go to sleep and just kind of getting those thoughts out of my brain, and but always ending it with gratitude, just to kind of brainwash myself into thinking that way. So no matter what happens, my brain automatically goes to, okay, what's something positive out of this experience? And nature, connecting with nature, like pretty simple stuff, man. So I'm sorry I
Any
have no
like
profound answer for you.
no. Well, I don't think there needs to be one. Well, what like are there any other specific ritualized things that you do within your life? I mean, gratitude kind of that's a big one for me. But let's just say a ritual for me is waking up in the morning and going outside on the bare ground and feeling the wet grass on the soles of my feet and
Right.
smoking a pipe, and I'll pray. That's my way of praying,
Yep.
praying to many different things.
And that's what we're saying. Yeah. I'll in the morning always will drink water first thing, and then go outside and just let the sun hit my face. Yeah, get that vitamin D. And I'll try to I don't ground myself. It's not the first thing I do every day, but I'm trying to do that more often every day, because I think it's really good to just connect with the dirt. And even when I do the prayer and meditation, most times I'll do some rape, so just to kind of ground me. And cold
Yeah,
shower.
cool.
Those are important. Sun, water, gratitude, and cold shower. Those are
Totally.
kind of my pillars. Yeah.
Yeah, and like a side thought, a tangent, but not really a tangent. Like when it comes to gratitude, man, gratitude is like it's like the highest perspective that one can take towards life. It's like any situation that we can find ourselves in, if we can find gratitude, if we can be grateful for that, man, that's some powerful stuff. To be able to be in a horrendous situation and to be able to find the way in which this is serving us, it's like, how can I be thankful for this? How is this serving me? Just being able to
Exactly.
tap into that is, potent stuff on many, many different levels. Yeah.
Exactly. Because you want to brainwash yourself in the positive sense of like training your mind so that you automatically go to the positive end of polarity instead of like going to the complaining side, because then that just kind of creates this downward spiral, and you don't want that. So gratitude, that's huge for
Cool.
me. Yeah.
All right, let me ask you another two Instagram questions, man. YouTube fame, how has this affected Tom's life?
I don't think about it. Yeah. I don't know. This is one of those things I kind of see it as silly. I don't really always try to kind of put myself, no, not even like put myself down, but just always remind myself that I don't know shit. And just because you got a lot of views, it doesn't mean you're special. You just so happen to go into this niche at a time where the psychedelic niche really boomed, and I just so happen to make some cool videos. So always remind myself that's not because you're special, and views and subscribers don't mean shit. So
Well, I mean, at the same time, to piggyback on top of that question, uh, you've certainly a lot of opportunities would have opened up through becoming more well recognized and having a lot more subscribers and likes on your channel. So I guess in that sense, then it would have, carved out a different direction in life than not being on YouTube and not having that level
that's
of
true. for sure. Like it's definitely opened up more doors, and I'm able to get like higher profile guests on the podcast and things like that. And yeah, for sure, it's definitely opened up a lot of opportunities, and I see the benefits of it, but I don't think of like even the fame or whatever. I'm pretty, I don't know. Like it's not like I go out in the street and then I get recognized all the time. Like every now and again, but no, it's nothing too crazy. I
Yeah,
try not
sure.
to think about it too much,
Mm,
to be honest.
mm. So, okay, here's another one for you. What does Tom wish he knew when he first started YouTubing?
Hmm. I would have not put all my eggs in the psychedelic basket from the start, and I would have like actually opened up and focused more on the spirituality, philosophy, psychology side of things. I mean, yeah, it wouldn't have helped your channel explode or grow as fast, but I think it's a good long-term game, because if you just focus on the one niche for many years and then you try to shift, then it's a little bit harder versus if you just, I don't know, if you want to create content what you want to do from the
Mm-hmm.
get-go.
Mm.
And yeah.
Mm. Well, I think because of the position that you're in when it comes to your YouTube channel and having so many viewers and subscribers and people checking out your stuff, I think you will probably have a useful, a valuable message to share when it comes to dealing with a lot of the hate that comes your way. Because, it's like people are posting all kinds of perspectives or,
Oh yeah. Tell me
especially let's
about
just
it.
say like Facebook or Instagram or something, and someone's sharing something from their heart, and then someone will come along and classic Australian tall poppy syndrome, want to cut them
Yep.
down. So, I mean, what
Yep.
have you learned when it comes to navigating social media in this way?
Oh, that's really helped with the shadow work side of things, because usually the negative comments that really sting, it's because there's some
There's
truth to it.
truth in there. Yeah.
100%. And the first few years I was way, way, way more sensitive and insecure,
Mm.
and I'm not saying that I'm completely free from that now, but no, I've just kind of learned to build thicker skin when it comes to that and just not really let it bother me too much. Like even
Mm.
recently, like I had a Christian on the podcast, and someone literally made a video saying that I'm promoting fascism and anti-LGBTQ and anti-psychedelics, which we didn't even talk about any of that kind of stuff, but whatever. Like someone actually made a video on me on this stuff. I was like, wow, I actually kind of felt flattered that, okay, it must be getting pretty big then for somebody
Totally.
to get so angry about this stuff, just for talking to someone on the other side of the fence, which is crazy. So, but I don't know, man. I guess just got to do you and don't get too involved into the comments. That even now I've turned my notifications on my comments off. The only time I read comments is like when I post a video and you actually have to go on. So usually for the first few days I'll read the comments, but I turn the notifications off, because the more you grow, the more haters you're going to get. And it's just the way it is. And it helps you feel at peace when you realize even the people that you look up to, that you think like, how can anyone hate this person? And then you go on their videos and you will see there's a lot of hate for even the people that you look up to. So it's probably a good sign. If you're not triggering anybody, you're probably not saying anything that's worth saying, especially
Mm.
if you're at a certain size. So,
Mm.
and maybe there's like a little bit of a trickster within me that kind of likes when people get triggered, because I'm like, okay, cool. I must have struck a chord there.
Yes, stirring the pot a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit with love, of
Mm.
course. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, that's a good message within that. It's that some of these hateful or negative comments can offer us potent medicine when it comes to reflecting on them and see how and if they apply within our lives. And I guess it's like the full circle of doing the shadow work
Mm-hmm.
and then also becoming more grounded and more centered within our sense of self and coming to know what our North Star is and our values and what we really stand for. So then when all of these hateful or negative comments inevitably do come along, if you keep standing up and sharing your heart and your message through the digital lens, well, then they become easier to deflect. And sometimes one might come through and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, there's I feel that one. There's some truth in that. Something for me to reflect on.
Yeah, exactly. Because the ones that do sting, then you just take it as a lesson, like, oh, that kind of hurt, but there's probably some truth to that. So let me reflect and marinate on that for a moment. But sometimes when it's like pure, just hateful comments, I just laugh. It's just funny. Like
Yeah.
what one of the most ridiculous ones I got was like, because I was wearing a checkered shirt, someone connected the dots and said that I was part of this elite pedophile group. I don't know, some crazy conspiracy theory that I was a part of this satanic cult or whatever. I'm like, what? Because I was wearing a flanny? Like, I don't understand. But yeah, man, some people really go there. They just connect. I just find it so funny how people can have such a definite opinion on someone that they've never actually met in real life. That to me, I just never made any sense. But yeah,
It's
it's
having that
entertaining
awareness
though, at
as well.
least. Yeah.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, and there's also the part where you're cultivating the awareness of how much energy you want to invest in something, i.e., reading through negative or hateful comments, because it's like, as I was posting a lot more on Facebook in particular, then a lot more negative comments were coming my way. But it's like, man, while all of these people are spending all their time writing all these comments and trying to debate me, and not just debate me, but try and tear me down in various ways, it's like, I'm already on to the next thing, like creating the next thing and like doing my thing. Like, I got a vision.
Yeah, because if you're going to debate, I would say it's a lot more effective doing it in person, like through a podcast or something like that. Like, I'm open to that, but when it comes to comments, oh man, there's just so much of the message gets lost when you're just reading words. You misinterpret the tone, the body language, and what they're actually saying. So it's just it's not worth it.
Yeah. And a byproduct of the digital age is what seems to be that a lot of humanity has lost its ability to hold nuance and complexity. It's like, just because we're having this conversation right now, I might say something and it's like, I may not even really believe that 100%, or it may be just one of many myriad of perspectives that I hold. But then someone will be like, "Oh, you said this thing and you believe this," and it's like, "Wait, hang on a second." It's like just free flowing conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
I was in the moment. It's like, I don't actually read.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. So I think,
just saying shit.
I think words are powerful, and they hold weight and hold meaning. But at the same time, there's a certain level of discernment and attachment that we need to kind of let go of them and just hold that awareness of nuance and complexity.
And you've got to be okay with being wrong as well. Like, I'm 28. I'll consider myself still very young. And so I'm cool with looking like a fool if I have to be, because the more mistakes I make, then usually the wiser you become. Obviously, if you learn from these experiences. So whatever, man, just got to be okay with being wrong. It doesn't really matter as long as you keep learning and growing. I think some people are just so insecure about them not chasing their own dreams that when they see someone else kind of doing their thing, it just triggers them, so they try to look for anything to nitpick and prove that you're wrong and stupid and they're right. So a lot of people just project their own shadows onto you, which is something that you got to realize. But sometimes you also got to realize when some people are giving constructive criticism, because you don't want to take any form of criticism as like, oh yeah, you're just projecting your shadow onto me and then you not learn anything. Because sometimes people can comment some legitimate issues of what you're saying, or give you a different perspective that might be worth listening to. So it's about discerning these things.
Yeah, discernment and awareness. Yeah, and like, to come full circle, one of the methods that we've both chosen to go down this path of cultivating discernment and awareness is through plant medicines and psychedelics, sacred medicines.
Yeah,
it's a great way of humbling the human self to come to recognize all of these things and learn these things on the life path. Yeah. So, what projects have you got on the go at the moment, mate?
I've got a few podcasts coming up. I still actually have a documentary in the making of my first 5-MeO Bufo experience. So yeah, look out for that. Yeah, just a few things here and there. Doing writing a script now on shadow work and integration, sharing some practical tips. I want to make that into kind of a neat little video cinematic essay. So that's what I'm
Yeah,
working
well,
on.
that's kind of, it seems like it's the direction that you have been heading in for a while, the real kind of cinematic filmography type of YouTube video.
Exactly.
Yeah, cool. All right, man. Well, I guess to leave our listeners and our viewers with maybe a final insight from you. Like, what are you finding is your overarching mission, your overarching message? And I don't want to put too much of a linear kind of spin on it right now. Like, there's only one mission or
Yeah.
message, but I'll throw that out to you.
Well, it's a few things because, like, even on my YouTube channel, I just try to honestly document my own journey and share some insights. And even if I do realize a certain philosophy that is wrong or particularly dangerous, I'll be the first to admit it and recorrect the course. But I guess if I had to sum it up, what I'm trying to do is just to help people navigate through the darkness by shining the light of self-awareness, and giving that kind of helping people find their own North Star by sharing certain principles and grounded philosophies that help them navigate through this human life, which can be very turbulent. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I love it, man. Yeah, through the lens of the digital realms. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Okay. All right, cool, man. Well, that was cool catching up.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. I hope that the listeners got something out of this, and I hope I didn't speak out of my ass too much, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, man. Yeah,
I'm
for
still
sure.
learning. I'm still learning,
All right, cool, man. Well, final words. Anything you want to leave the listeners, viewers with? Reflections, insights, words of wisdom before we jump off?
Just have a beautiful day and enjoy your life. Don't take yourself too seriously.
Simple, man. Yeah, good stuff.
All right, brother.
Dude. Cool. Well, we'll tune in again whenever we tune in.
Yeah, man. As soon as the restrictions start lifting, I'd love to head over to your land and check it out.
Oh, yeah, please do. Yeah, it would be a pleasure to have you up here, mate.
Yeah, man. Sweet as.
All right,
Thanks for
cool,
having me
dude.
on again.
Yeah. All right, we'll tune in soon.